Okay, here we are, page 58, Mr. Tushman. That last month in school was awful. It's not like anyone was out and out mean to me, but I felt iced out by Amos and Henry and Miles. I just didn't feel popular anymore. No one really ever laughed at my jokes. No one wanted to hang out with me. I felt like I could disappear from the school and nobody would miss me. Meanwhile, Auggie was walking down the hallways like some cool dude getting high-fived by all the jocks in the upper grades. Whatever. Mr. Tushman called me into his office one day. "How's it going, Julian?" he asked me. "Fine." "Did you ever write that apology letter I asked you to write?" "My dad says I'm leaving the school, so I don't have to write anything," I answered. "Oh," he said, nodding. "I guess I was hoping you'd want to write it on your own." "Why?" I said back. "Everyone thinks I'm this big dirtbag now anyway. What the heck is writing a letter going to accomplish?" "Julian, look, I know everyone thinks I'm this unfeeling kid who doesn't feel remorse," I said, using air quotes. "Julian," said Mr. Tushman, "no one—" Suddenly I felt like I was about to cry, so I just interrupted him. "I'm really late for class and I don't want to get into trouble, so can I please go?" Mr. Tushman looked sad. He nodded. Then I left his office without looking back. A few days later, we received an official notice from the school telling us that they had withdrawn their invitation to re-enroll in the fall. I didn't think it mattered, since Dad had told them we weren't going back anyway. But we still hadn't heard from the other schools I had applied to, and if I didn't get into any of them, we had planned on my going back to Beecher Prep. But now that was impossible. Mom and Dad were furious at the school, like crazy mad, mostly because they had already paid the tuition for the next year in advance, and the school wasn't planning on returning the money. See, that's the thing with private schools. They can kick you out for any reason. Luckily, a few days later, we did find out that I'd gotten into my first choice private school, not far from where I lived. I'd have to wear a uniform, but that was okay. Better than having to go to Beecher Prep every day. Needless to say, we skipped the graduation ceremony at the end of the year. For those of you who've seen the movie, I'm sure you're thinking, wow, there are a lot of differences between this Julian chapter and the movie. Because in the movie, it was more his mom who was saying a lot of what the dad was saying, and Julian was at the graduation ceremony. He actually was clapping for Auggie. Okay, so page 61, this is called After, and it's written as a poem. "That is only tears such as men use," said Bagheera. "Now I know thou art a man, and a man's cub no longer. The jungle is shut indeed to thee henceforward. Let them fall, Mowgli. They are only tears." That's by Rudyard Kipling from The Jungle Book. Maybe you've seen the Jungle Book movie. "Oh, the wind is blowing. Through the graves the wind is blowing. Freedom soon will come, then will come from the shadows." So in that first part, I just want to kind of go over that again. I don't know if you're familiar with The Jungle Book or not, but it was made into a Disney movie. But Mowgli was human, but he was raised by in the jungle, basically, and by, I think it was cubs, right? So anyway, bears maybe. So Bagheera is telling him that he's crying, that only a man could cry, that cubs don't cry that way. And he says, he's finally acknowledging that he's a man. So different. Okay. He says, "The jungle is shut indeed to thee henceforward," like telling him, you got to go be a person. You can no longer be an animal. And I've never, and I'm relating this to the cartoon, The Jungle Book, but I do think they made a live action movie. I don't think I've seen it, but yeah, I do remember that now. Okay. And that second part was by Leonard Cohen, The Partisan. All right, this is still Julian. It's called Summer Vacation. "My parents and I went to Paris in June. The original plan was that we would return to New York in July, since I was supposed to go to rock and roll camp with Henry Miles. But after everything that happened, I didn't want to do that anymore. My parents decided to let me stay with my grandmother for the rest of the summer. Usually, I hated staying with grandmother, but I was okay about it this time. I knew that after my parents went home, I would spend the entire day in my PJs playing Halo, and Grandmere wouldn't care in the least. I could pretty much do whatever I wanted. Grandmere wasn't exactly the typical grandma type. No baking cookies for Grandmere. No knitting sweaters. She was, as Dad always said, something of a character. Even though she was in her 80s, she dressed like a fashion model. Super glamorous. Lots of makeup and perfume. High heels. She never woke up until 2 in the afternoon, and then she'd take at least 2 hours to get dressed. Once she was up, she would take me out shopping or to a museum or a fancy restaurant. She wasn't into doing kid stuff, if you know what I mean. She'd never sit through a PG movie with me, for instance, so I ended up seeing a lot of movies that were totally age inappropriate. Mom, I knew, would go completely ballistic if she got wind of some of the movies Grandmere took me to see. But Grandmere was French and was always saying my parents were too American anyway. Grandmere also didn't talk to me like I was a little kid. Even when I was younger, she never used baby words or talked to me the way grown-ups usually talk to little kids. She used regular words to describe everything. Like, if I would say, je veux faire pipi, meaning I want to go make pee-pee, she would say, you need to urinate? Go to the lavatory. And she cursed sometimes, too. Boy, she could curse. And if I didn't know what a curse word meant, all I had to do was ask her, and she would explain it to me. In detail. I can't even tell you some of the words she explained to me. Anyway, I was glad to be away from New York City for the whole summer. I was hoping that I would get all those kids out of my head. Auggie, Jack, Summer, Henry, Miles, all of them. If I never saw any of those kids again, seriously, I would be the happiest kid in Paris. Okay, next chapter is called Mr. Brown. The only thing I was a little bummed about is that I never got to say goodbye to any of my teachers at Beecher Prep. I really liked some of them. Mr. Brown, my English teacher, was probably my favorite teacher of all time. He had always been really nice to me. I loved writing, and he was really complimentary about it. And I never got to tell him I wasn't coming back to Beecher Prep. At the beginning of the year, Mr. Brown had told all of us that he wanted us to send him one of our own precepts over the summer. So, one afternoon, while Grandmere was sleeping, I started thinking about sending him a precept from Paris. I went to one of the tourist shops down the block and bought a postcard of a gargoyle, one of those at the top of the Notre Dame. The first thing I thought when I saw it was that it reminded me of Auggie. But then I thought, ugh, why am I still thinking about him? Why do I still see his face wherever I go? I can't wait to start over. And that's when it hit me. My precept. I wrote it down really quickly. Sometimes it's good to start over. There, perfect. I loved it. I got Mr. Brown's address from his teacher page on the Beecher Prep website and dropped it in the mail the same day. But then, after I sent it, I realized he wasn't going to understand what it meant. Not really. He didn't have the whole background story about why I was so happy to be leaving Beecher Prep and starting over somewhere new. So I decided to write him an email to tell him everything that had happened last year. I mean, not everything. Dad had specifically told me not to ever tell anyone at the school about the mean stuff I did to Auggie, for legal reasons. But I wanted Mr. Brown to know enough so that he would understand my precept. I also wanted him to know that I thought he was a great teacher. Mom had told everyone that I wasn't going back to Beecher Prep because we were unhappy with the academics and the teachers. I felt kind of bad about that because I didn't want Mr. Brown to ever think I was unhappy with him. So anyway, I decided to send Mr. Brown an email to tbrown@beecherprepschool.edu from Julian Albans at easymail.com. My precept. Hi, Mr. Brown. I just sent you my precept in the mail. Sometimes it's good to start over. It's on a postcard of a gargoyle. I wrote this precept because I'm going to a new school in September. I ended up hating Beecher Prep. I didn't like the students, but I did like the teachers. I thought your class was great, so don't take my not going back personally. I don't know if you know the whole long story, but basically the reason I'm not going back to Beecher Prep is, well, not to name names, but there was one student I really didn't get along with. Actually, it was two students. You can probably guess who they are because one of them punched me in the mouth. Anyway, these kids were not my favorite people in the world. We started writing mean notes to each other. I repeat, each other. It was a two-way street, but I'm the one who got in trouble for it. Just me. It was so unfair. The truth is, Mr. Tushman had it in for me because my mom was trying to get him fired. Anyway, long story short, I got suspended for 2 weeks for writing the notes. No one knows this, though. It's a secret, so please don't tell anyone. The school said it had a zero-tolerance policy against bullying. But I don't think what I did was bullying. My parents got so mad at the school, they decided to enroll me in a different school next year. So yeah, that's the story. I really wish that student had never come to Beecher Prep. My whole year would have been so much better. I hated having to be in his classes. He gave me nightmares. I would still be going to Beecher Prep if he hadn't been there. It's a bummer. I really liked your class, though. You were a great teacher. I wanted you to know that. I thought it was good that I hadn't named names, but I figured he'd know who I was talking about. I really didn't expect to hear back from him, but the very next day when I checked my inbox, there was an email from Mr. Brown. I was so excited. To Julian Albans at easymail.com from tbrown@beecherprepschool.edu. Re my precept. Re means reference to. Hi, Julian. Thanks so much for your email. I'm looking forward to getting the gargoyle postcard. I was sorry to hear you wouldn't be coming back to Beecher Prep. I always thought you were a great student and a gifted writer. By the way, I love your precept. I agree. Sometimes it's good to start over. A fresh start gives us the chance to reflect on the past, weigh the things we've done, and apply what we've learned from those things to the future. If we don't examine the past, we don't learn from it. As for the kids you don't like, I do think I know who you're talking about. I'm sorry the year didn't turn out to be a happy one for you, but I hope you'd take a little time to ask yourself why. Things that happen to us, even the bad stuff, can often teach us a little bit about ourselves. Do you ever wonder why you had such a hard time with these two students? Was it perhaps their friendship that bothered you? Were you troubled by Augie's physical appearance? You mentioned that you started having nightmares. Did you ever consider that maybe you were just a little afraid of Augie, Julian? Sometimes fear can make even the nicest kids say and do things they wouldn't ordinarily say or do. Perhaps you should explore these feelings further. In any case, I wish you the best of luck in your new school, Julian. You're a good kid, a natural leader. Just remember to use your leadership for good, huh? Don't forget, always choose kind. I don't know why, but I was so happy to get that email from Mr. Brown. I knew he would be understanding. I was so tired of everyone thinking I was this demon child, you know? It was obvious that Mr. Brown knew I wasn't. I reread his email like 10 times. I was smiling from ear to ear. So? Grandmere asked me. She had just woken up and was having her breakfast, a croissant and a café au lait, delivered from downstairs. I haven't seen you this happy all summer long. What is it that you are reading, mon cher? Oh, I got an email from one of my teachers, I answered. Mr. Brown. From your old school? She asked. I thought they were all bad, those teachers. I thought it was good riddance to all of them. Grandmere had a thick French accent that was hard to understand sometimes. What? Good riddance, she repeated. Never mind. I thought the teachers were all stupid. The way she pronounced stupid was funny, like stupid. Not at all. Not all. Not Mr. Brown, I answered. So what did he write to make you so happy? Oh, nothing much, I said. It's just, I thought everyone hated me, but now I know Mr. Brown doesn't. Grandmere looked at me. Why would everyone hate you, Julian? She asked. You were such a good boy. I don't know, I answered. Read me the email, she said. No, Grandmere, I started to say. Read, she commanded, pointing her finger at the screen. All right, I'm going to stop here because I'm going to run out of time. I don't want to run out of time, so I'll pick this up in the next section.